Writing Out Loud, a program designed to explore in-depth interviews with writers to hear that words have voices. Our hostess for today's program is Teresa Miller, Executive Director for the Oklahoma Center for Poets and Writers at OSU Tulsa.
Hello everyone, I'm Teresa Miller and welcome to Writing Out Loud. My very special guest today is the legendary singer-songwriter Arlo Guthrie. Thanks for being here, Arlo.
Yippee!
Singer, yippee, I like that. Singer-songwriter. Which comes first for you, lyrics or melody?
Well, the truth is, each song is different. And sometimes the lyrics show up and you're scratching your head thinking, well, what kind of melody did they put to that? And sometimes the melody shows up and I've been playing them, going down the road or whatever, waiting for the words to show up. And sometimes they never show up.
That's a bad feeling.
No, well.
What do? Write in a musical transition?
I have sneakily snuck them into songs from time to time. The next closest fit, like a little interlude in the middle of a different song, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I just keep playing them. And the truth is, I don't think they belong to you. They're just like, it's just like looking at a sunset or a pretty scene or something. And so I play with them and just let them go.
Yeah. One of your most famous songs is Alice's Restaurant. What inspired this song? Lots of things.
Well, I was actually, today, I was having to write a piece because this Thanksgiving, this coming Thanksgiving, will be the 40th anniversary of having written this marathon saga.
40th anniversary?
Yeah, I wrote that in 65, or started writing it in 65. I actually finished it sometime in 66. It became a record in 67. It became a movie in 69. By that time, it had made me a sort of a cultural somebody, and I've been working ever since, frankly, but I haven't done Alice's Restaurant for many years because it just got to be too long. I mean, it ended up being a half hour's worth of my life. Like that, did you ever see that Groundhog Day movie?
Yes,
it's like this never-ending, repetitious half hour of every show we ever did. And so years ago, I quit doing it, but on the occasion of the 40th anniversary, I'm having to relearn it. And that is a task.
Do you want to change it when you go back and look at it again?
I did change it for the 30th anniversary, just a little bit. I added some historic footnotes. But I'm going to go back to the original for the 40th.
I just wonder if it's natural when you're singing a song, and you sing a song a lot like you did Alice's Restaurant, if it just changes each time you sing it a little bit. You add something new, or does it become just standard for you?
Well, the timing of it is important in the performance of it. It's not like if you read it in a book, it wouldn't be as funny, hopefully, as if you heard somebody perform it, because it's really a performance piece. So it changes by what kind of audience is there, how big or how far away they are. All of those things change, but everything changes. And it changes very minutely. But it's enough to make something, to make the pauses a little longer or a little shorter or whatever it's going to take to make the performance work. But other than that, it doesn't change.
You spoke about your audience. You've played in so many different venues. You've been in films. You've been at Carnegie Hall. You've been at Woodstock. You play high school auditoriums sometimes. How would you describe your audience?
Well, I wouldn't describe them so much as to say that they come out of the woodwork. That's where they're from. Now, we just played, for example, we played down in Texas at College Station at Texas A&M, and which is a fairly conservative neighborhood. But our fans have been from all of the sort of shades of the political spectrum, because good-natured humor, like something that Will Rogers discovered, is something that everybody can appreciate, no matter what end of the sort of spectrum you're on. And so our audience is made up of very conservative people, of very liberal people, of young, unwashed, unbathed, people with very long hair, to people that come dressed very nicely in suits and ties.
Probably CPAs.
Well, I don't know about that, but it is. Our audience is made up of everybody, and I have always loved that. I think that's part of the joy of doing what we're doing, is to see those people sitting next to each other, and then at the end of the evening, maybe even singing together. That doesn't happen very often in this world anymore,
no,
and it's a shame, and it should happen more. And so part of our work is to make that happen.
Do you think people feel a special connection with you because of your lyrics? I remember where I was when I first heard Alice's Restaurant. Do you get a lot of that?
Yeah.
And people feel like, oh gosh, Arlo's my good buddy.
Well, it is funny, because a lot of people like that will remember where they were when they heard it the first time, and they may not have seen me or heard of me since. And so I get the fun of having to of having, it's almost like having a new victim. I mean, if somebody hasn't heard your stories, heard your jokes, heard your done or been to a show, they're like new again.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more fun if we do have crowds that follow us from show to show to show, like the Grateful Dead kind of thing.
Sure.
But there are always people who show up spontaneously. Maybe they bought a season ticket to an event, and they say, "Oh, let's go to this one. Let's see what that's like." That's the ones I like.
What's your favorite Arlo Guthrie song?
My favorite one?
Your favorite one?
I don't know. I don't really have one. I have ones for different moods. If I'm feeling kind of grouchy or moody or sad or something, I have ones like that. Mm-hmm. And if I'm feeling particularly like fooling around with, making kids laugh or something, then I have other ones for that. Mm-hmm. But it's a wide spectrum.
How good have you gotten at predicting how an audience is going to react to a particular song, something you're trying out for the first time?
Pretty good.
Pretty good. So you're not surprised that often?
I'm surprised by the circumstances of things. If you do this a lot, like you do this a lot, from the very beginning, if you look at yourself, you're not as... well, let's put it this way. The first time you hear your voice on a tape machine mm-hmm. or on a camera, you see yourself, you go, wow, that's me? I don't sound like that. I don't look like that. Well, if you do that a whole lot, you get over that really quick. And if you play in front of other people a whole lot, you get over that pretty quick, too. And what happens is that you get a real feel for not just how people will react to you, but you get to look at yourself as if you were somebody else. And most people don't get to do that. But if you're in the public eye, as a politician or as a celebrity or as a TV person or whatever it is, you get to look at yourself almost as if you were somebody else. And I get to do that, and that's fun. So I get to gauge the audience's, and I get to be surprised from time to time. But if I walk out on stage, generally, it won't take more than a few seconds before I know how much work I've got to do that night.
Yeah. When you sing someone else's lyrics, do they mean as much to you?
Oh, yeah. The songs you make are your own. Other people may have wrote them. It's like food that you eat. Mm-hmm. I mean, other people might have grew it, but by the time it gets to you, you're the one eating it. I mean, It's yours.
Well, many critics consider that your version of the City of New Orleans is the best version ever done, the definitive version.
Well, there was a little, back in 1971, I was playing in a bar in Chicago, and I was walking out the door after the show, and this little guy stopped me and said, "Arlo, before you go, I want to sing you a song." I said, "Come on, I don't want to hear no songs. I hate songs." And I was just tired. I was being a butthead, and I wanted to get out of there. And the guy says, "Look, Arlo, I just want to sing you one song, man." I said, "Okay, buy me a beer. I'll sit here and drink it. As long as it lasts, you can do whatever you want." He says, "That sounds like a good deal." I says, "It does." And it turned out to be this guy, Steve Goodman,
Yeah.
who wrote this song, City of New Orleans, and he sang it for me that night. I put it on my piano when I got home from that tour, sat there for about 3 months, and then one day I looked at it and I said, oh yeah. Started playing it a little bit, and changed it around just a little bit, didn't change much at all. Maybe slowed it down. Steve's version was a little faster, and we put it on a record. And sure enough, out of the South somewhere, actually out of Atlanta. In those days, radio stations weren't like today, where each radio station plays a certain kind of music. But back in those days, you had a few radio stations, and they all played all kinds of music, for the most part. And this station out of Atlanta started playing City of New Orleans, and it started spreading throughout the South. And Warner Brothers, who I was with at the time, said, well, we can't possibly make a single out of it because it's not a single, it's not disco. And that was what was big in 1971, was disco, you know, and people going like, you know, whatever they do. And so they never did anything with it until it got to be so big that they finally went out and they pressed these singles, which were 45 pieces, 45 records. No one knows what a record is today. But by the time they got there, of course, it had sort of started going down the other side of the mountain of fame and fortune, and but it did great. And the guy that wrote it, Steve Goodman, was a terrific artist. He was fighting leukemia all of his life, and he passed away some years ago. But right before he died, he called me up one time. He was in the hospital. He said, Arlo, congratulations. And I hadn't heard from him for 10 years. I said, Stevie, good to hear from you. I says, congratulations on what? He says, well, Willie recorded the song. And I said, oh, what are you calling me for? He says, well, he did it your way, too. And I thought that was the sweetest thing.
Yeah.
For this guy to call me from his hospital bed just to say that Willie had done the song, and he had done it the way that I had changed it a little bit. And that now, of course, Stevie's gone, but Willie and I have become friends, and there are a few other people that have sung that song and done very well with it.
It's a great song, just a great song. Beautiful.
It's a nice piece of America.
Exactly. You mentioned playing the piano. How many instruments do you play?
I play one well, which is the guitar.
Yeah.
And the rest I just get by.
Well, you think being familiar with all these different instruments, I know you get by with the harmonica and some other things, do you think that makes you a better singer and lyricist?
I was never a good singer. I'm a lousy singer. It took me years just to sing in tune. But I'm not like one of those guys that can... I don't have the voice. I'm not going to sing opera or something like that. I can get my own songs out because my songs are like stories. And they're like the old cowboy songs, or like the old, Western tales that before there was TV and radio and entertainment, people would sit around and do these kind of stories. And that went on forever. And you didn't have to have a good voice. You just had to have one that could last long enough to get the story told.
And be distinctive. Your voice is very distinctive.
Well, yeah, I guess it is. And to some people it's very grating. And they go, oh my goodness, what is that? And it's not as grating as some other people, but what are you going to do? But I have learned to tell my stories with the voice that I've got. And to play the instruments that I play. My kids all grew up. They actually sing and play much better than I do. And I actually play. I mean, my dad was a singer and a songwriter and a player, but he wasn't that good of an instrumentalist. He was good enough to tell his stories, and that's what he wanted to do. He wasn't trying to play with an orchestra or something like that. He was just trying to tell whatever was on his mind. In some cases, it was mostly philosophical stuff, thoughts about how the world was and how it could be made maybe a little better, and how maybe people shouldn't be taking advantage of each other so much, and those kinds of things. Aside from the usual love and lost stories, and I have always liked that kind of songs and stories and music that anybody can do. You don't have to be a specialist in your field. It's the kind of music we used to call back porch picking. I mean, you get your neighbor. It's the kind of music you play when you get home from regular work.
Yeah.
And I have been so lucky to be able to do this kind of stuff as my regular work. It should be outlawed. It's just a criminal offense.
Well, I'm glad you're guilty.
I am guilty.
We know your dad through his music. What was he like on a personal level?
He's a very complicated guy. Complicated, and yet he was able to distill thoughts and ideas that were complex into such easily digestible things. He had an incredible memory. Now, I'm not sure, because I never really talked to him about it, but he remembered things that he could describe in details almost like somebody with a photographic memory. He would remember things decades earlier and be able to write them in such a way so that it was almost like... As a matter of fact, he wrote a book one time. In his 20s, he took a trip with his family. They went from here in Oklahoma down to where my great-grandfather used to hang out in the Big Bend part of Texas, down along the Rio Grande. And they took a trip down there when he was a young man, during the Depression. He wrote a story about it maybe 20 years later as a book. And a publisher found that manuscript 20 years after that. So now we're talking maybe 40 or 50 years after the actual event. Here's a guy that comes across a manuscript describing this journey. And taking the manuscript, he was able to retrace the family's trek down to this little campsite in the middle, near Terlingua in Texas. And he came to the exact same spot where the pot in the tree was still there, that my great-grandfather had put in there.
No kidding.
That's the kind of writing my dad was able to do. He was able to recall in such detail that, like, you could follow it and get to where he had been. He was able to do that with historic events that he was never actually at, but he would read in the newspaper about something that was important to him. He would write it in a song, and the people who were at that event or their kids would say, "My God, this is exactly what happened." I went up to a town in Calumet, Michigan, just last year. There was an event that happened there in 1913, and where some kids got killed. My dad was born in 1912. So 1913, a year after he was born, an event happens. My dad reads about it and he's in his 20s. And he wrote about it so accurately and so professionally that town, even though the place where all that had happened is gone now, they still write me letters and come by with mementos from this event that happened almost 100 years ago.
What a great legacy.
Well, that's what my dad did. He was able to tell the story of regular folks in ways that no textbook could do.
What did you think of the movie Bound for Glory?
I didn't like it.
Tell me why.
Well, first of all, my dad was a little guy. And he had a great sense of humor, and he had a twinkle in his eye. In the movie Bound for Glory, it looked great, but David Carradine, who played my dad, is a big guy. So all of that little guy looking up at you, sort of, the tough little guy, doesn't work if it's a big guy looking down at you. It's like it's a different take. There's a difference between a little dog and a big dog, and my dad was a little dog. He was only about 5'6", and he was a tiny little guy. But he had the bite of a big dog. Well, when you say his words and when you act his way, and you're 6'2", and you don't have a sense of humor, and one was not written in for you, So as an actor, even if you had one or could perform it, it wasn't in the script to begin with. And so it comes off as being a sort of rough and tumble journey of freight trains and, and partying and whatever was going on, which my dad all did, but I missed the heart of it. I didn't get the heart of it. I didn't get the bigger picture of what he was struggling for and fighting for. I didn't get the feeling that he was talking not just about himself, but about a whole group of millions and millions of Americans who had just lost everything and who were just looking for a real job in a real place where people were just trying to be decent and not take advantage of each other and stuff like that. I didn't get that in that film, and that's who my dad was.
Nicely put. Good review of the film.
But it looked beautiful. And it was the first time on film that we got to see, through the use of animation and stuff, what the Dust Bowl actually looked like. So there was that one scene where you see that cloud coming, and now all of those songs that my dad wrote about that and how terrified people were, I began to see, which I could never imagine. So the film was wonderful in some ways, don't get me wrong. No, it was just in his character and the portrayal of him that I had some problems.
Boy, it would have been a hard role to play.
Well, I would love to see it remade, and now with the graphic stuff that they can do, they could they could make that time come alive.
Your dad died of Huntington's disease, which is a hereditary illness. Have you and your children been spared?
Well, I'm kind of weird, but I don't know that that's... And my kids are weird, but I think that's mostly due to my wife. Yeah, I guess we have. You know, my dad had, I think, 8 kids, with 3 wives, and almost all of them are gone now. I'm the oldest surviving son. My brother is still alive, and my sister is still alive. All of the other kids are gone. 2 died from Huntington's. Bill Rogers died, got hit by a freight train back years ago. He was my half-brother. And my half-sister died many years ago, and I'm not sure even of the circumstances. But his life was not... And I had an older sister that passed away in a tragic fire. Those are not the usual odds. His family life was a tough one, even for in those days when everybody's life was tough. And luckily for us, his legacy has become so important and frankly profitable.
Well, good.
Well,
he'd like that, wouldn't he?
I think he would get a kick out of it. I'll just give you one little example. I went to a guitar store in L.A. About 2 or 3 years ago, and they said, "Arlo, we have your dad's guitar, and it's for sale. Would you like to buy it?" And I knew they didn't have it because no guitars of his had ever been found. And he gave them away as soon as you couldn't give him anything. He would give everything away. You give him a car, as soon as it was out of gas, you give it to somebody. He was that kind of... Yeah. He had no conception. You couldn't trust him with that stuff, in other words. But they take me upstairs, and here's his guitar. It's all beat up. Looks like more of a piece of driftwood than anything else. And I turn it over, and there's his name. And I recognized his writing. And I said, "My God, this is his guitar. How did you get this?" Turns out he had given it to Eddie Albert.
Oh, no kidding.
And Eddie Albert, I think, is still around.
Yeah.
He may not be doing that well. This Eddie Albert's family, in order to either raise money or do something, took this valued guitar and was trying to raise some money with it. I thought, I probably can't afford it. It's probably going to be like $10,000, $15,000, something like that.
Sure.
It's not playable. It's just a beat up piece of driftwood, basically, with strings on it.
And the name on back.
I said, "How much are you guys looking for it?" They said, "Oh, we're looking at about $250,000. I said, what? For that? He said, yeah. I said, you'll never get it. Well, sure enough, they sold it within another week or two. It went up to the Jimi Hendrix Museum in somewhere, I think, around Seattle. Meanwhile, I go downstairs, and on the wall, behind a bulletproof, UV light-protected piece of plexiglass, is Gene Autry's guitar. Now, Gene Autry's guitar is in pristine shape. It's got beautiful carved stuff and all that. And it was going for about $50,000. And I thought, my dad would have got such a kick out of that his beat-up old piece of nothing was worth about $250,000, while Gene Autry's guitar, who I would have died to have Gene's guitar, frankly, because I loved his music too, and he was a real hero for me, was going around $50,000, and I thought, who would have thunk?
No.
Didn't make any sense at all. It's just, the world is crazy.
Yeah. Well, it is. Tell us about an American scrapbook. We just have a minute here, so we can't talk long, but great concept.
Well, a few years ago, we thought that we'd take some of my songs, some of my dad's songs, and in the spirit of maybe Copeland and some of the American composers, try to create that orchestral style for these songs. Because, frankly, they all draw from the same well.
Yeah.
All of the American composers, Gershwin, Copeland, all of these people, they all use the American folk songs as their inspiration for a lot of their work. I thought, let's try to marry them up, see what happens. That's what we did.
Certainly been successful. You're also the author of the children's book, Moose Comes Walking. We're going to show that at the end of the show. Thank you for being here, Arlo.
Teresa, nice to be here.
And thank all of you for joining us on Writing Out Loud.
Jackie Cooper Volvo supports numerous community projects and is proud to be a sponsor of Writing Out Loud.